Hey guys, Steel here, back with another video for Hearts of Iron 4, and today we're doing something a little bit different. We are looking at a few of my favorite templates, when you should be using them. But first, if you like these videos, leave a like and consider subscribing for more regular content like this. Also, check out that join button next to the new subscriptions. That will take you to the YouTube membership page. It's a great way to support the channel and support what I do. Also, check out our Discord server. It's pretty active. It's a cool community. I'll leave a link to that in the description down below. But enough rambling, on to the video. Let's just start with Germany. You won't be doing anything fancy anyway. Let's look at the templates. This is the standard German template. Let's alter it a little bit and get to the first of my favorites. This one here is the basic 20 width, also known as the 10-0 infantry. This is the foundation of any army. This is what your front lines should be made up of. It fits into combat perfectly with its 20 combat width, has good organization, good defense, soft attack, and hit points, and it's really cheap. It costs just 10,000 men and 1,000 guns. And when combat width is filled with these boys, they will defend against most infantry pushes and even some tank attacks if they're in the right terrain, I mean like marshes or mountains or behind the river. And even if these guys should not be able to hold out, they will last a pretty long time and make the enemy pay for every meter they take. They will inflict a lot more damage than they take, so you will be effectively trading your land for the enemy's industrial capacity, or IC. That's the cost down here. If your industry allows, there are a few support companies you could add that make these divisions even better, and I would add them in this order. Number 1, engineer companies. Not only do these increase the unit's defense, they also drastically raise the unit's ability to dig in, increasing its max entrenchment, making it even better on the defensive, and giving some slight bonus across rivers, but that's not the purpose of these guys. These are your defenders. A second option to add, very important if you cannot win the air war, and even if you can, it's still handy if you have the industrial capacity. Support anti-air. It slightly adds to the defense, gives you a nice bit of heart attack, but very important, it adds piercing. Enough piercing to be able to stand up to early game light tank divisions, especially if they've already taken a bit of damage and are not at full strength. And this will mitigate the enemy's air power, meaning the enemy cast will not simply shred your units. You might actually hold on even without green air. Very handy if you're playing a country that has no chance in hell of winning the air war. And then finally, if you're feeling like Mr. Big Bucks himself and you have the industrial capacity to spare, add on some support artillery. This will give these units a little bit of extra bite and increase their defense a little bit more. This will be the optimum setup for your 20 with infantry block. With these boys in position, they will hold the line. Now do note, I have been referring to these as defensive units, and that is their purpose. They are not meant to be sitting on a front line that is attacking. They can follow behind an attack made by other units, sure, that is their purpose, but they are not designed to make attacks themselves. They have very little soft attack for that, not enough breakthrough to really matter. They will not really be going anywhere. I would not recommend using these for offensives. But before we get on to these legendary attacking divisions, let's have a quick look at the 5-0 10 combat width. This is the smaller brother of the 20 combat width infantry block. This one has a few uses. For one, it's extremely cheap but still has the same organization, meaning it's very good to use in places where you're expecting to lose anyway, but want to make the enemy pay for it. These can slow down an enemy offensive pretty well. Very handy as a Russia trying to fall back to your Stalin line, but you don't want the Germans on your heels. These units will do the job nicely. They're also not bad as a China who has a lot of land to trade for IC with the Japanese, meaning you can make a lot of these just to slow the enemy down and just drown them in your own bodies. It's also pretty good for coastal garrisons, with that 60 organization giving your other units time to rush to the aid, such as your 20 or 40 with port garrisons. These guys will simply hold as long as they can, while your actual decent units will rush to the defensive, and together they should be able to repel most invasions. Now, in terms of support companies, I wouldn't add any, to be honest. You're supposed to spam this division in massive numbers, and their job is flat out to do or die. They are not recommended to be buffed with support companies. If you have too much support equipment, if there even is such a thing, you could consider adding on engineers, AA, or artillery, but personally I wouldn't. These are expendable infantry blocks. Now, if you want to wage offensives and you find yourself lacking tanks, you somehow don't have the industrial capacity to build up a decent tank force, or you're playing a nation that is going to war so soon that it cannot realistically get enough tanks, that is where this unit comes in, the classic 14-4. If you're going to attack with infantry, this is the division to do it with. It has decent hit points for its cost, and it even has enough concentrated breakthrough and soft attack to really get you victories. It can also be used defensively, though I wouldn't recommend it on single player. You can stack these guys on ports and they will hold out for a relatively long time. They can even outshine tanks if you're pushing through areas where tanks are going to take a lot of attrition, such as in marshes or in mud. And they're pretty good, but they are expensive. What I mean by that is they don't require that much equipment to make, but they will take massive casualties compared to armored units because they have relatively low breakthrough, hardness, and hit points, meaning you need a hefty industry to keep up an offensive with these guys. In terms of support equipment, you want to give these guys all the love you can. That means engineers, support AA, support artillery, and yes, logistics companies if you're fighting in a region where supply is going to be tight, such as Russia or maybe even North Africa and the Balkans. For the last slot here, you can fit in pretty much what you would like. There's something to be said for the extra soft attack that rocket artillery would add, though I'm not a fan. Or you could add in some signal companies to ensure their reinforcement is up to snuff. Personally, I like going with the signal companies. Or if you notice that you are hemorrhaging manpower and you're really suffering, you could add in hospitals. I wouldn't do that personally, because if that's what you've come to, you've already lost, but hospitals could help alleviate manpower issues. So the classic 14-4, your offensive infantry. That brings us finally to the tank divisions. These 40 width behemoths are what you should be using to attack. Any major nation has the industrial capacity to make these bad boys, and we'll start with the basic of the basic, the light tanks. Their armor is nothing to write home about. Their breakthrough is enough to break the AI units, and you will probably defeat most of what the AI can throw at you early game, but as the game progresses past 1940, you will start finding that many AI units are able to pierce these divisions and they lose much of the benefit of the armor. Now, they still have a very high max speed, and provided you can produce enough tanks to offset the losses, they might still be worth it just to overwhelm enemy front lines with their speed, make a breach, and push through. They are perfect for creating large encirclements simply because nothing the AI has will be able to catch up to them. That said, could use them for sneaking victory points as well, though they do run the risk of becoming encircled eventually. What I like to use instead is the slightly slower but infinitely more powerful medium tank division. Usually I stick to a template layout like this, simply stick 13 medium tanks in there with 7 motorized or maybe even 7 mechanized if your industry can handle it, and these guys will overrun pretty much anything the AI can throw at you. They have significantly more armor than light units, so they will be viable for far longer, and they're not nearly as slow as heavy tanks, who are just incredibly expensive as well. Now do note, these are more expensive to make than light tanks, and also takes longer before you unlock them, but as Germany, a country that gets a lot of boosts to medium tanks in their focus tree, medium tanks are your bread and butter, especially in single player games. Make use of these guys as your offensive spearheads, break through enemy lines and work towards encirclements, and let the infantry follow behind. These guys will do the heavy lifting. Now, in terms of support companies, we are not going want to throw too much in there. Any support company we add is going to hurt the armor value, so I will be sticking with the basics. Engineers, obviously for those river crossings. Logistics are a good idea, especially if you're heading into the vastness of Russia, where your supply is going to be a massive problem. Signal companies can have a great benefit as well, allowing your units to reinforce into the battle and giving you an extra edge when trying to push. And finally, if you're playing the superior firepower doctrine, there is something to be said for adding support artillery as well. Though if you're going mobile warfare, I wouldn't add it. Personally, if I know I'm going to go for a medium tank force, I would go mobile warfare every time. So that said, this is my go-to division for medium tanks. Sometimes if I'm feeling like I have a massive industry and I don't know what to spend it on, might switch out the motorized infantry for mechanized for some more hardness, though they are significantly more expensive. The choice is yours really. In single player, it's absolutely not needed. And then finally, there's something to be said for heavy tanks. I do not use these in single player. In multiplayer, they are all the meta, but I personally don't play enough multiplayer to really give you advice on the topic. What I do know is that if you're stacking heavy tanks, you do not want motorized in there. You want your half tracks, you want your mechanized infantry. Maximize the armor value of the unit, make it impenetrable. Now these are slow and ponderous beasts, and they are incredibly expensive to make. You will not be crapping out a lot of these divisions, but they are perfect for your micro game. These are what win you wars in multiplayer. In single player, they are just a gigantic sink of IC and time that you could be using to churn out more units of a different variety. And finally, I want to say something about the 7-2 division. This classic 7 infantry, 2 artillery battalion unit. It used to be good. It used to be really good, primarily as a defensive unit, but with some ability to attack. But that all changed with the artillery nerf, I believe in 2018. Now it's just awful. It's awful compared to any of the templates we discussed before, and in my honest opinion, it is one of the worst commonly used templates out there. On the defense, it's worse than a 20 with infantry block because it has significantly less organization, defense, and hit points compared to that massive chunk of infantry. Yes, it does have more soft attack, and that will help it finish easy fights quicker, but that doesn't matter. You don't need to finish easy fights quicker. You need to survive the tough fights and hold the line. On the offensive, it has all of the problems that a 14-4 has, namely its massive cost and the losses it will take, but without any of the benefits of stat concentration, meaning it does not have enough attack to outclass the enemy's defense, meaning it will do no critical attacks and it will simply bleed itself dry on any decently designed unit. The only reason it works at all is because the AI is still running off instructions that predate the artillery nerf, meaning the AI is also using this unit a lot. That's why you can still use it in single player, but it is incredibly inefficient at what it does. Literally any of the templates we discussed before will outperform this unit. It is incredibly expensive to equip compared to a 20 with infantry block, both in industrial cost, you need an incredible amount of artillery compared to that other unit, and in resources, meaning you are importing a ton of tungsten, sucking up your industrial capacity that way. The main reason you will keep seeing this mentioned again and again and again is that it's still featured in a lot of old guides that are still floating out there, and there are streamers out there, other content creators, and well, just Reddit in general, that will keep pushing this unit because they simply don't know any better. People out there have done the math. I've done the math. Trust me, this unit is bad. It should only be used as a last-ditch effort in very niche cases. In almost every conceivable scenario, this unit is to be avoided. I hope we can get that out of this world. I don't want to see you guys using 7-2s moving forward. Just stick to what we've mentioned before. The best way forward is 20 with infantry and tanks. Now, if you liked this video and found it helpful, leave a like and consider subscribing for more regular content. Hit me up in the comments with your suggestions and your questions, and check out the YouTube membership page. There's a button down there on the video that says join. That will take you to the membership page. It's an excellent way to help support the channel and help support what I do. If you didn't like the video, or if you think I made mistakes and did something wrong, hit me up in the comments. I'm always looking to learn. Now, I hope that with this video we can get a few misconceptions out of this world and help people make glorious empires that can stand the test of time. This has been me, Peter Steele. Have a good one.